We have never been more focused on health as we do everything we can to stop the spread of COVID. But this year, the pressure on our mental health has been undeniable as we adjust to a new way of living.
This is a massive, massive thing that we're all going through. There's no way that there's not going to be a rise in mental health issues.
I know that there's days that you won't believe that you'll get through it, but there is help out there.
I still have struggles, lockdown's been particularly hard for us.
Just a couple of years ago, Robert Allen's life was falling apart.
I just really got myself at rock bottom. I was on the verge of suicide. Serious thoughts about how I was going to do it, where I was going to do it. It was almost like, that was all I could think about. Okay, of our new band called Piano and
Guitar.
Thoughts of his young son and wife brought him back from the brink.
Okay, go. I just had this sweeping feeling through my mind that I couldn't have my son growing up thinking I didn't love him. I hadn't really opened up to my wife about anything for a long time. Like I said, she had no idea. And it was just like this outpouring. Straight away I started to feel better because I felt like there is another way to go. I wasn't suddenly cured or better, but I did feel, right, okay, this is a turning point.
Robert was also hit by the news that he had kidney cancer. He was successfully operated on.
I went and spoke to my mum and I sat her down and I said, look, you know about the cancer, but you don't know the whole story. Telling somebody that I had mental health problems or mental health issues or letting people know that I was vulnerable was a completely different scenario to telling somebody that I had cancer and I had to have an operation. That was a physical illness, so that's more acceptable, but don't ever let anybody know that you're struggling mentally.
Robert is taking part in a programme called The Changing Room, a group for men brought together through a love of football to tackle their mental health problems.
What's so reassuring about it is you'll be talking about something that's affected you or how you're feeling, and there'll be other guys in the group and they'll be like, yeah, that's just like me. So straight away you're thinking, I'm not on my own in this. One of the key things about the Changing Room and the project is you're going somewhere and you're meeting with people face to face. And obviously you couldn't do that just because the lockdown rules didn't allow it. So we were creative and we set up a series of Zoom phone calls and the lads joined in. But it's not the same. I didn't feel as comfortable speaking on the Zoom call as what I would have done if we'd been sitting just together in a group. There have been times when I have struggled a wee bit.
Do you think lockdown will have impacted on many people's mental health?
Absolutely. I think we have almost a ticking time bomb coming.
I couldn't really cope with becoming disabled, and as a man, I didn't know who to speak to, I didn't know who to turn to.
Craig's life changed forever 6 years ago. His dreams of becoming a chef were shattered when he injured his hand and became seriously depressed.
I was sleeping all day, and then when I was going out and about, I just didn't want to be there. I couldn't face people. And I just kept actively believing that it would be better if I wasn't here. It'd be better on my family if I wasn't here. It'd be better on kind of society if I wasn't here. I just couldn't see any hope. And then one day, I just kind of broke down in front of my mum and dad. They phoned the doctors, they got the doctor's appointment, and then that's when I was diagnosed with reactive depression.
Exercise helped Craig get his life back on track, something he's tried to maintain over the past few months.
Because it would just take your mind off it and actually release the endorphins that would make you happier.
Has lockdown had any effect on you?
There's been periods of, I'd say, where my mood would drop lower.
Do you have a message for anybody who's watching this tonight, who's perhaps in a dark place?
Please just phone the doctor and speak up about it. If I didn't have that little breakdown and speak to my parents, I wouldn't be here.
At the beginning of lockdown, it was quite tough.
Lindsay has had depression since she was a teenager.
How did you feel when Boris Johnson announced that the country was going into lockdown? Were you concerned about your mental health at that point?
Yeah, I was much more worried about the effect on my mental health than I was worried about contracting COVID-19. I live on my own. The first 4 months, I didn't physically touch a single person. I didn't get a hug. It definitely affected me. I bubbled with my best friend, and it made such a difference. Like we met and we had a really big long hug, and it was lovely.
Oh my God, this is so nice.
Before March, Lindsay was a regular at the gym. With support, she's managed to continue her exercise regime.
My PT has been absolutely invaluable. We switched everything to Zoom calls. When we were allowed, we would meet at the park. She adapted all of my plans to be home workouts. Lovely. Good. I've realised that there's times where I almost don't want to get out of bed if I'm having a bad run of things. So my minimum amount of exercise that I'll get every day is I do 20,000 steps. That helps me mentally. I find by the time I get back to my house, I feel much better.
Chris Kriegen knows only too well the strain on mental health services in the current climate.
We know that the pandemic has created anxiety across the general population.
I mean, how worried are you about the impact?
The mental health system that we have in Scotland was already creaking. We have an enormous need, enormous demand, and at the same time we know that referrals have actually dropped. So there's pent-up demand in the system, and that's a perfect storm. Our real priority are people who came into this pandemic with pre-existing mental health problems. Many of them have had services withdrawn, and they're having to deal with the uncertainty. Simply returning, restarting is not going to be enough. We're going to have to really rethink the whole way in which we provide mental health services in Scotland, and we're going to have to inject an enormous amount of new energy and investment into the provision of mental health services.
And how are you going to do that? Is there a plan for that just yet?
There needs to be a plan. There needs to be a plan because people's lives depend on it.